Thank you very much. I had a great time last year, and I appreciate you welcoming me back. Apparently, I didn't completely stink, so that's a good thing. Go ahead and throw up the slides, guys. On the big screen, probably put the slides more than me, because that's going to drive most of this thing. I apologize, this guy is out up here. Last year, this guy was out when I spoke. I was told it was fixed, it's worked all year, and Friday it went out again. Somebody on your tech crew has something against me. I don't know what it is. But do your best to see the screens, because we're going to have a lot of stuff on there. That's my blog at philcooke.com. We talk about issues of faith, media, and culture. I'd love for you to go visit that. My Twitter handle's at philcooke. Come check out what that stream is all about and what we're doing there. Johnny was exactly right. I have two companies. One is Cooke Pictures. We essentially help Christians not stink at the media. And if you've ever watched Christian television or listened to Christian radio, you know I'll be busy for a long time. There's much work to be done. We also have a company, TWC Films, that did a couple Super Bowl spots. In fact, I showed you a spot that we did last year. Can I show you another one? This is one of my partners in the company is Ralph Winter, who produced X-Men and Wolverine, and so we're always fascinated with superheroes. But me being the oddball in the group, I'm always fascinated with what superheroes do when they retire. What do superheroes do when they get old? And so we had a chance to do a commercial. One of our directors did this spot a few years ago, and I thought it was a perfect example that would answer that question. So let me know what you think.
As a rule, superheroes have one power. I was born with the gift of adhesion. Barb and I met. There's a funny story. She was sitting in the window of the dormitory.
Not recommended.
Anyway, she fell 4 stories. I caught her, but with the force, we were stuck together for a week.
And we've never been apart.
We sunk a lot of money into the Captain Clean action figure, but the adhesive was found to be a skin irritant, so, that was unfortunate. A lot of the crisis calls go to the younger heroes nowadays, and that's a shame, because I still feel vital.
Do you want to mean?
Oh, sorry.
What happens when superheroes get old? You know, I believe in C.S. Lewis's stepson, Doug Gresham's quote that we don't need more Christian movies, we need more Christians making good movies. And so I would encourage you today that whatever career you're going to go into, be really good at it. What I want to talk a little bit today about is that very thing, and it's mostly about you. The truth is, when you leave here in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, okay, a few of you 5, 6, 7 years, whenever you leave here, you're going to have a message to share with the culture. You're going to want to make an impact, whether you're a doctor or a business person or a filmmaker or a writer or a teacher. You're going to have a message to share with the culture. The problem is, how do you get that message out there? How do you get your voice heard? Today, we live in the most distracted culture in the history of the world. It's tougher than ever to get heard out there in today's culture. And I make my living dealing with perspective. In fact, I'm a big believer that the angle that you look at things matters. How you look at something can actually change the meaning. In fact, I've discovered over the years, I kind of have a file of pictures I've made at Christians who mean well. You guys are from the South, right? You know what he means well. I grew up in North Carolina, and you know, when you say he means well, that really means he's an idiot. He's got a good heart. You know, we love that in the South. She's a stupid jerk, but she's got a good heart. You can get away with anything. Well, anyway, I made a file of Christians who have a good heart, who mean well, but don't quite get the message out really very well at all. I've discovered that if you cover up part of the message, people won't get it. You have to be very careful. I got a mailer. The people in this crowd are taking a little longer than the others to get it. I got a mailer a couple months ago from a humanitarian organization raising money for hungry kids. And I think they were trying to communicate that when I would give, my gift would help feed hungry kids even after I'm gone. But the mailer came in the mail, it looked like this. Mary Ellen died last year. Today she'll feed 100 hungry children. Ooh. Anybody old enough to remember that movie Soylent Green? They're eating us. And one of my favorites is the Methodist. I don't think the Methodist realized what would happen when they had to crunch their name down for their Bible camp to go on a street sign. Because this is the way it came out. Meth Bible Camp. I think you'd have to agree that a meth Bible camp would be a dead end, so that part of the sign they got right. Last one, though, is maybe my absolute favorite. There was a group of church employees, you've seen this a million times, group of church employees decided to retire. So somebody in the office, somebody really nice in the office took their picture, got them together, took their picture, and they put it in the local newspaper, and they did a little story about these church employees retiring. Well, that was sweet. I found this in the paper. The problem was where they stood when they took their picture, because this is the way it came out. If Jesus is retiring, let's all go home. What are we doing? We need to tell our story better. And the truth is, Christianity changed the Western world. We created Da Vinci. We created Michelangelo. We transformed the literature and the art of the West. But go into a typical Christian bookstore today, and you'll find stuff like this. Jesus hates it when you smoke ashtrays. The talking prayer Jesus doll. And my favorite is the cross USB drive, because Jesus saves, right? Come on, folks. We got to do better than this. We've got to come up with better stuff. And so I wrote my book, my newest book, Jolt. Get the jump on a world that's constantly changing. In fact, I'm going to be doing a book signing right down here. Wave your hands, guys. I'm going to be doing book signing right when we're done here. My new book, Jolt, Get the Jump on the World That's Constantly Changing, is how to get your message heard. How do you become successful in today's incredibly disruptive culture? One thing we know is technology is changing us as much as it's changing the world. If you look at how iPhones and mobile phones are changing, it's definitely changing us. In fact, it's interesting that if you look at newspapers, 7 days of a daily newspaper, when you read 7 days of a daily newspaper, you've read more than most people just 100 years ago read in their entire lifetime. We're literally being bombarded with messages. In fact, this is your biggest enemy today. When you go into the world, when you go out into your career, guys, just leave the slides on, probably be better. They can see me well enough, trust me, I'm not that great looking, I need to be magnified. This is your biggest challenge today, is clutter. Clutter, that's Hong Kong, but it's not that different in Atlanta, in LA where I live, and certainly if you've been to New York, you've seen the same thing. We're literally bombarded. When I came here to Liberty, when I came to the airport in LA, I stopped and got gas, and there were video monitors in the gas pump. I stayed at a hotel last week, and there were video monitors in the elevator. We're literally being bombarded with messages. In fact, some researchers tell us that you are seeing as many as 5,000 media messages every single day. It's interesting that Nielsen, the TV rating service, tells us the average television is on in the average home in America 8 hours and 18 minutes a day. The average TV. And yet the National Sleep Study Center says we're only sleeping 6 hours and 40 minutes a day. So in the average home in America, the television is on almost 2 hours longer than we sleep. You know that there's so much media out there that YouTube spends $1 million a day expanding their server space for the number of videos that are uploaded to it every single day. There's no question there's a dark side to this whole video revolution. It's interesting that 65% of North Americans spend more time with their email than they do their spouse. In fact, 40% of the average employee's day today is spent sending and receiving email messages. We used to actually be productive, but now we go to work and send email messages. I think this statistic is really interesting that 77% of workers report that when their email goes down, they experience enormous stress, with 10% of those people actually physically assaulting their computers. Be honest, how many of those 10% are in this room right now? Scientists are studying something interesting. They discovered that the endorphin center in your brain that fires when you gamble, that rush you get when you pull a one-armed bandit, not that any of you have ever done that, but that endorphin center that fires, that rush we get, is the same endorphin center that fires when you hit send on your email. Psychologists are discovering that email is becoming just as addictive as gambling. As a result, a lot of psychologists are pushing to have internet disorder actually created into an actual psychological malady. So the question becomes, technology is not going to change. It's not going away. We use it every day. How do we deal with it? Most of you guys know that in April, Facebook passed the 500 million member mark. My question to you is, Well, the truth is, 500 million members. Let's talk about that for a minute. By population, it's the third largest country in the world. Ever think of it that way? Somewhere between the US and India. If you don't listen to anything else I say today, listen to this. Stop thinking about missions in terms of geographical boundaries and start thinking about missions in terms of in digital terms. If Facebook is the third largest country in the world, my question to you is, who's sending missionaries to that country? Who's planting churches in that country? That is a huge mission field. And you guys are the ones that make up for it. You know what, last year in 2010, for the first time, millennials, you guys in this room, passed us baby boomers as the largest demographic group in America. Now you control everything. 97% of you are already connected to a social network. I'm surprised it's that low. But the fact is, you are going to be the drivers. And the truth is, this is the way most of you see yourselves. Why won't he message me? We are Crackberry addicts. I went to dinner with 5 CEOs the other night. Brilliant guys, hugely successful CEOs. Went to a nice steakhouse, had a great time talking, but one of them could not put his BlackBerry down. 5 interesting guys around a table, very significant guys, and yet he had a fork in one hand and his BlackBerry in the other. He was just checking it every few seconds to see if that important email, whatever that could be, was coming down the pike. And let me tell you something, you know what I think is sexy is this guy, the Bluetooth earpiece guy. Is that hot or what? My wife and I were at a wedding probably 6 or 8 months ago, and there was a guy 5 rows in front of us who had this big old Bluetooth earpiece in his ear. And as the bride was getting ready to come down the aisle, one of the ushers went up to him and said, "Sir, would you mind, removing your earpiece?" He said, "No, I can't. I may get an important phone call." And so as the lights dimmed and the bride started down the aisle, his stupid earpiece started beep, beep, blinking that stupid blue light like a cheap disco ball in his ear. Twitter this: technology in the hands of stupid people is a horrifying thought. So the question is, how do we get our story out there? I wrote a book a few years ago called Branding Faith: Why Some Churches and Nonprofits Impact the Culture and Others Don't. The question is, in that book, I talked about a brand as simply a story that surrounds a product or a person or an organization. In other words, what do people think of when they think of you? Trust me, in today's digital distracted culture, they're never going to hear your message if they can't get past their initial perception of who you are. Companies like Nike, companies like Starbucks know this. You know what Nike's brand statement is? It's called the spirit of the athlete. When Nike makes a TV commercial, and trust me, we've worked with these guys, when they make a TV commercial, you never hear a Nike commercial about the construction of their shoes, about how great the rubber is, about how easy they are to put on. Nike's commercials are about how you feel when you wear them. They're emotionally driven. They understand they want to raise people up. It's incredibly important because you know what? It's so powerful that teenagers are willing to die for Nikes. It's interesting, nobody dies for Converse or Adidas, but on July 2nd, 2011, in a mall in Atlanta, 12 teenagers were robbed, 2 were dead, and 3 were stabbed. Why? Because they were releasing the new Nikes. $200 pair of tennis shoes. People are willing to die for. That's the power of a brand story. It's incredibly important. So the question becomes, what's yours? What's your story? If you want to be a doctor, an executive, filmmaker, writer, author, what is your story? What are you trying to tell? What is the message you want to share the world? And perhaps most important, how do you break through? Let me give you a handful of things that I think will make a huge difference. And this is worth writing down. Get your notepad out, get your pencil. And by the way, let me tell you this. I met a businessman the other day in Burbank, where I live. Very successful guy. And I said, "How did you get rich?" He said, "Well, about 14 years ago, my wife took me out to the mall to go shopping." He said, "I hate shopping, hate it." So while she was in the store, I went out in the mall and sat on a bench, and I started watching teenagers use their cell phone. This was back in the very early days of cell phones, back in the days when it just rang. Can you imagine? It rang. He said he watched these guys, and he had this idea. He said, "I thought if they could download their favorite songs and use those as ringtones, that'd be pretty cool." So he thought it was good enough that he wrote the idea down on a piece of paper and put it in his pocket. And guess what? He promptly forgot about it. 9 months went by. He went to the closet, put on that same jacket, reached into his pocket, pulled out that piece of paper, read it again, and he said, "You know what? This is a good idea." So he called a couple buddies, they got together, they bought a computer, got the rights from one cell phone company, bought the rights to 5 songs. 4 years later, he sold that company for $70 million. Now to me, it's not the 70 million. Everybody knows ringtones are hugely popular now. In fact, record companies make more from ringtones than they do from records now. Do you know that? CDs. But it's interesting that it's not the money he made, it's the fact that had he not written that idea down, he'd have completely forgotten about it. What is the idea that God could drop on you that could transform your life? That could change everything in your world, and if you don't write it down, you'll forget it. I get my ideas in the shower. I don't know about you. And I used to have so much frustration that by the time I got out and dried off and wrote it down, I forgot about it. So my assistant went online and she actually found me a company that makes waterproof legal pads. Now my productivity is shooting through the roof. But write it down. Ideas are the most fragile thing in the world. So here's some things I want you to write down. Number 1, everything communicates. Everything communicates. Even when you're trying not to communicate, you're communicating something. Pastors have to deal with this from everything in their world, from that tacky carpet churches have to the plants on stage. What is it that pastors have about plants on stage? I don't get it, but they love it. The design of the building, that jerky usher. If you have an usher out there that's a jerk when people come in the door, that's the perception they will have of your church. It's Starbucks. I was at Starbucks the other day. And they're a wonderful company, and I love them, but I was at an airport, and I went to a Starbucks, and there was a jerky guy there at the counter. And there was a sweet little old lady in front of me, and she said, "Sir, I'd like a chai tea latte or something." It's some chick drink, you know what I'm talking about. And he said, "Ma'am, we don't have that drink." And she said, "Well, I think you do." And I looked behind him, and on the menu board right behind him, the drink was listed. And he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm an employee at Starbucks. You'd think I'd know what we offered, right?" Total idiot. So I stepped in front of her because the Lord's been speaking to me lately about starting a ministry that beats people up. I'm convinced that there's some people, the only way to reach them for the gospel is just take them around back and, okay, enough. I'm teasing. But I said, "Ma'am, excuse me." And I stepped in front of her and said, "Hey, Jack, turn around, look at the menu board." And he did. And he realized to his horror that they did have that drink. He spun around. He never spoke to us again. He never looked at us in the eye. He just rang up the order and walked away. Now, at that moment, I don't care how much Starbucks executives make. I don't care how brilliant their advertising is. I don't care how much money they spend on their restaurants. At that moment, that jerky sales guy was that brand for me. Everything communicates. Everything in your life. Understand it, and it will change everything about your career. Number 2, in a media-driven culture, visibility is just as important as ability. You're at Liberty University developing your ability. You're getting trained to do your career really well. But you know what? In a distracted, media-driven culture where there's so many things to do, you have to learn to get on the radar. I have 500 channels on my DirecTV. There are millions of websites. There's Twitter, there's Facebook. I don't need to listen to you. You come to me for a job, I don't care. The truth is, you need to know how to get on the radar just as much as you need to be good at what you do. Getting on that radar really counts. There are thousands of men and women in this country who are incredibly dedicated men and women of God, and they will never see the light of day. They will never get their message heard because they don't know how to get on the radar. There are professors at campuses like this who are geniuses, but their influence doesn't exceed the outside boundaries of that university. Why? Because they don't know how to get their message out there. Understanding how to cut through the clutter we face today is incredibly important. Number 3, you can't brand a lie. In a digital world, in an instant message world, in an email world, word travels fast, and you better be what you say you are. We need to live more transparent lives than ever. Guess what? Representative Anthony Weiner found that out last year. You can spend your whole career saying you're one thing, but when you're found out, and believe me, in a digital culture, you find out fast. It changes everything. Digital culture is unforgiving. I'll tell you this, as you develop your career, think of Google less as about search and more as about reputation management. That DUI you got in college that you thought everybody forgotten about will show up in a Google search. People can find out stuff. Live a transparent life. The gospel calls us to it, and the digital world forces us into it. Number 4, understand the power of a name. When you leave here, that name for your project, your company, your church, your organization, your film, your book, names matter more than ever. Because in this incredibly distracted world, nobody's gonna get past your name. Go to Barnes & Noble, test it. How many books do you buy simply on the power of the title? You don't stand there in Barnes & Noble and read the book. You look at the title, and if that name doesn't work, you're not interested. Let me show you a list of church names I found. These are real live church names where people actually, obviously weren't paying attention to me. These are churches, good people, good churches. But look at some of the names. Runs Baptist Church, Hooker Church of Christ, Hygiene United Methodist. The list goes on and on. Nodaway United Methodist, Sleeper United Methodist. That's one of my favorites. I mean, these are wonderful people. But how many people are gonna drive by, look at the name and say, that's not for me? Be nice out there. I was at a restaurant in North Carolina the other day and I went to the restroom, ran out and told my wife, give me a camera, and I took this picture. The jury's out on this one. I'm debating whether you should be careful about where you put your name or whether that's a brilliant idea for advertising, because you do sit there and have some idle time to read the ad. I kind of default to be careful where you put your name. Again, wonderful people, probably a wonderful church, but be careful where you put your name. Another thing, let me tell you about, and this is probably going to offend a few people, is in the digital world, your URL matters. Your website name matters, and we don't look at it out of context. There's a company in LA called The Speed of Art. Brilliant company, graphic designers. Their thing is to get you graphic designs fast. Great website, great company, but if you look at the URL by itself, not so good. Not so good. There's another website that's actually quite a brilliant idea. It's called, if you need a therapist or you need a counselor in your area, it's a website that you put in your zip code and it'll find it for you. It's a great site called the Therapist Finder. But if you look at the URL by itself, it's the Rapist Finder. Real companies. There's a terrific technology site. If you need help with your computer, they'll hook you up with somebody. It's called the Experts Exchange. Great idea. But the website by itself is Experts Exchange. So I'm just saying, look at your website out of context. May surprise you. Number 5, learn to speak the language of design. Whatever you go to in your career, understand the power of design. You guys are one of the most design-driven generations in our history. Go to a Starbucks, go to an Apple store, go to a Verizon store, and you understand the power of design. And let me tell you this, as you move into your career, don't let people tell you, let's dumb the design down a little bit because we don't want to turn off the old folks. You see this especially in ministry. Let's don't make our website too cool. I don't want to alienate our old folks, and they're the ones that give the most. That's such a myth, such an incredible myth. You know what? One of the fastest growing markets for technology today, for mobile devices especially, is senior citizens. But you never see an Apple ad with an old dude on his walker listening to his iPod. Why? Old people want to be cool too. Never dumb down your designs thinking you're not going to offend old people. They want to see hip, contemporary stuff as much as anybody. But let me tell you this. I tell this to pastors all the time. If you do go into ministry, I want you to promise me that you'll help me eliminate 4 images. If I can do this before I die, I will die a happy man. Flags, globes, doves, and flames. If we can eliminate those from the church, we will have done a great service to the church, trust me. I mean, come on, you can do better than that. Get in the car and drive a mile in any direction, and you will find at least 1 or more of these images on a church sign somewhere. Nothing wrong with them, don't get me wrong, but when everybody uses them, it completely devalues their power. Aren't we more creative? God introduced us to himself in the first chapter of Genesis as a creator. We are made in his image, and yet we rip everybody off. Can't we express our faith in something more interesting and innovative and creative and different? Flags, doves, globes, and flames. I spoke at a pastor's conference last year, and a pastor came up to me afterwards and said, Phil, you've cut me to the quick. He handed me his business card. It had all 4 images on it. And because it was a business card, they were crammed together, so it looked like the dove was on fire crashing into the globe. It's really pitiful. Pitiful, pitiful. And let me say this, and without being controversial, I'm even sensitive about how we use the cross. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't use it, I'm saying we forget about its power. We forget about what it means, and we forget maybe more than anything that we're reaching a culture that doesn't understand what it is. I was in downtown LA last year, area called the Jewelry Mart. It's a 4 square block area. It's like a Middle Eastern bazaar. You can haggle over stuff. It's a fantastic place. And I was down there, I snuck down there actually to get a Christmas gift for my wife because I'm an awesome husband. And I was standing next to a couple in their 30s. I figured they were in about 35. And because I have the spiritual gift of overhearing what other people are saying, I was listening to them. And this guy brought out a tray of cross necklaces. It was really interesting, really pretty. And they started on one end with real modern, simple crosses. And they went down to more ornate, fancy crosses. At the end, they were kind of Catholic-style crosses with Jesus on the necklace, you know, Jesus on the cross. And this couple was looking at him. And I listened to this girl especially, and she was going down this tray going, wow, these are beautiful necklaces. I love these. And as she got to the end, she said, whoa, 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 hang on a second. Who's the little guy on the necklace? Why is there a little guy on the cross necklace? 35-year-old woman in Los Angeles had no clue who the little guy hanging on the cross necklace was. That's who you're speaking to. Think about it. So I'm not saying, please, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't use the cross. I'm saying use it, but make sure people understand what it means. Images have power. You know, the early church, historians tell us the early church would never consider using the cross as a symbol of the Christian faith until after the last person who had actually witnessed a Roman execution had actually died. To think they would use a Roman execution tool as a symbol of their Savior? That was anathema. That was the worst, farthest thing from their mind. Now we've turned it on its head, obviously, and we use it for resurrection. We use it as a symbol of the empty cross. But think about the meaning. It would be a lot like if Jesus was alive today and crucified, or executed today. 2,000 years from now, people would be wearing electric chair jewelry. I love that electric chair necklace you're wearing. That is such a precious electric chair bracelet. Think about it. We totally forget the power that images have. So I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying think about it. Make sure people understand its power and make sure they understand what it means. Last couple things. Number 6, lose the lingo. When you move out from here into your career, stop using Christianese. You know what I'm talking about, those phrases that we get so comfortable with in the church. Washed in the blood, justification, sanctification, born again, prophetic anointing, mighty time of fellowship. What is that? You know, we hear that in the church all the time. Well, we had a mighty time of fellowship last night in the service. Does anybody at the office stand around the water cooler and say, hey, Bob, on Friday night after work, let's go out to the bar and have a mighty time of fellowship? No, nobody uses this stuff. Now, I'll grant you theology professors, I got my PhD in theology. I'll give it to you in class, use them away. Except mighty time of fellowship, don't use that. But justification, those are all important phrases. But when you're in the culture, quit it. We get so stuck in using these phrases without thinking about their meanings. I saw this yard sign the other day. The Crucifixion Summer Fun Fest. How about that? That's awesome. Take your family. Man. It's not the message we send, it's the message they receive. The culture doesn't speak the way we do. Now let me flip it. My daughter, who lives in New York City, took this picture on a subway last week. I love this. In my Father's house are many mansions and many rooms, John 14:2. Clearly, Jesus was not a New Yorker. That's genius. That's genius. You may be offended that somebody's using scripture in a secular ad, but the truth is, millions of people ride the New York subways every day and are looking at scripture. Speak the language of the culture in an innovative, creative way, and it will change everything. Last thing, number 7. It's about the niche. This is incredibly important. When you leave here, in a distracted culture where people are so pulled apart, where they don't have time to listen to your message, they don't have time to know what you do, they don't have time to read your resume, you will never get noticed by being pretty good at a lot of things. You will only get noticed today by being extraordinary at one big thing. One big thing. The question is, what's that one thing for you? What's the one thing that God has called you to do that you could potentially be the best in the world at doing? That's all you need to think about for the rest of your life. The Grammy Awards are interesting. Female Grammy winners. The one woman who has won more Grammys than any other woman in history is not Barbra Streisand or Aretha Franklin or Celine Dion or Beyonce. The female artist who has won more Grammys than anybody in history, Alison Krauss, the bluegrass player. Isn't that amazing? Why? She's not well known, she's not super famous, but she's the best in the world at a very tight niche. You know, every year when they announce the Bluegrass Awards, guess who's gonna clean house? Alison Krauss. Let me tell you, in today's cluttered, distracted culture, to get on the radar with your message of the gospel, with your message of your career, with your message of your films, whatever it is, you need to be extraordinary at one big thing. What's the unique perspective you bring to the table? It's not about being like everybody else. It's about being unique. Can I show you one last commercial? This is a commercial we didn't do, actually. This was a commercial that I found in competition in Europe. It's a Danish commercial, so it's not in English, but it's subtitled. So get into a place where you can see the subtitles because they're very important, but I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Het gaat dan om, hè? Routine. We merken dat hij pas een beetje toe. Ging bij jou niet intrekken natuurlijk.
Ja.
In de kerk, hè? Geloven worden, hè? Ja, want hij is Jezus volgen, hè?
Ja.
Ik ben er ook niet.
Ja.
En we willen ook jullie natuurlijk naar de kerk.
Ja.
Dat zie je. We binnen natuurlijk ook niet. Dat verkozen is, hè?
Cristo sarà presente quando un joven
Daar is het probleem. Ja. Kan je niet verder, ja. We willen het staan, hè. Maar normaal, al die frutsels en fratsen, daar ben je eigenlijk katholiek, hè. En we moeten hem ook altijd afzetten bij die kerk, hè. Dan moeten we naar een wijnkerk. Het is dan een protestant geloof, maar als Poetin dat wil, ja, dan is het niet aan.
Dog food. Dog food. Look, if a secular Danish ad agency can be that creative, how about people who are born in the image of God, the ultimate creator of all time? Let's leave this place. Let's commit to being more creative and innovative and engaging the culture in a way that will change the world. I'll be down here to sign books later. Love to see you. Thank you.